difficult woman. The car almost hit her. Natalie stared at it with a pale face. The front bumper was barely a fist's width from her knee. If the driver hadn't stopped in time, she would have been sent flying by the impact. "Are you crazy?" The driver got out of the car and walked over to her angrily. It wasn't that she didn't care about her life. She had simply rushed out in a moment of desperation, not caring about anything but stopping the car. She swallowed. She was still a little frightened, but she forced a smile and apologized. I'm sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. She looked into the back of the car, but she couldn't see Bryce's face. So she turned back to the driver and said sincerely, "I want to talk to Bryce Clare." "You're looking for Mr. Clare." The driver frowned awkwardly. "Yes. Would you mind telling him?" Natalie looked at him pleadingly. The driver was in a difficult situation. He knew his boss's temperament and that he definitely wouldn't want to meet this woman. But when he thought of her reckless actions, his heart softened. "Wait a moment. Let me ask." Natalie immediately broke into a wide smile. Thank you. The driver glanced at her, then turned around and walked to the rear door. The window slowly lowered, revealing Bryce's extraordinarily handsome face. "What's going on?" There was a hint of displeasure in the deep voice. The driver respectfully lowered his head. "This lady says she wants to talk to you." Bryce's eyelid twitched. He looked at Natalie, who was standing in front of the car, with an indifferent gaze. He frowned slightly and lowered his head to look at his watch. A client was waiting to see him. It was too late to talk to her. "Tell her I'm busy." The window slowly rose. "Sorry, Mr. Clare is busy." The driver passed on Bryce's message and got back into the car. "Busy?" Natalie frowned. No, she had to talk to him. Who else could save her child? The sound of the car starting rang in her ears. Without thinking, she blocked it again, shouting to the man inside, "Mr. Clare, please give me 5 minutes. I'll leave right after, I promise." "Mr. Clare, what should we do?" Bryce frowned as he looked at the anxious woman. A hint of displeasure surfaced in his eyes. Oh, she was truly a difficult woman. Noticing that he was upset, the driver quickly said, "I'll send her away." But just as he was about to open the door, a low voice came from behind him. "Let her in." Bryce narrowed his eyes at Natalie. He wanted to see what she was really up to. The driver was stunned, but he quickly got out of the car to tell her. When Natalie heard his words, she looked up and, without meaning to, met Bryce's deep gaze. Her heart skipped a beat as she lowered her head and quickly got into the car. The moment she got in, she started talking. "Mr. Clare, I need your help. My dad has taken Liam and is hiding him from me. I need your help to get him back." Bryce raised his eyebrows. She really was rude, asking him to help her the moment she opened her mouth. He couldn't help but feel annoyed. He said with disdain, "Why should I?" He had only helped her before for the sake of the child. Did she really think he was being kind? She choked, not knowing how to answer. She knew her request was unreasonable, but she was also at her wit's end. That was why she had decided to ask for his help. If she'd had a choice, she wouldn't have asked him. But now only he could help her. Thinking of this, she clenched her fists and summoned the courage to plead, "Mr. Clare, I beg of you, please help me." She lowered her head, bit her lower lip, and gritted her teeth. "If you help me, I'll give you anything." "Anything?" Bryce glanced at her and smiled sarcastically. "What do you have that I could possibly want? Or do you mean?" He moved closer to her, causing her to shrink back in fear. His voice, full of contempt, whispered in her ear, "Will you sleep with me?" Instantly, Natalie's face turned red, and she bit harder on her lip without uttering a word. Bryce scoffed. He sat up straight and adjusted the cuffs of his shirt with his slender fingers. He said coldly, "Unfortunately for you, I have a lot of women. I can't even count how many, begging me to sleep with them every day." Natalie looked up, surprised. She knew he was very popular with women, but she was still surprised to hear the words from his own mouth. At that moment, she realized she had been in too much of a hurry to find him. Embarrassment welled up in her heart. Even if she wanted to repay him with her body, he still might not want it. And, as he had said himself, he wasn't short of women, so what was he missing? Natalie smiled bitterly to herself. She suddenly realized that asking him for help was the stupidest thing she had ever done in her life. She had come here to be humiliated. She took a deep breath and forced a smile. "I'm sorry, Mr. Clare. Sorry to bother you." With that, she hurriedly opened the car door and got out. She felt dizzy. The sun was shining down on her, and now that she was outside, she couldn't help but frown. Bryce turned, and his calm gaze landed on her. In the sunlight, her face was very pale, as white as a sheet. She looked especially frail and beautiful. Something flashed across his heart, but he ignored it, and instead looked away and ordered the driver to go. Natalie watched Bryce's car leave. Even though the sun was shining brightly, she could not suppress the chill that crept up slowly from the bottom of her heart. If he wasn't willing to help her, then who could she ask? She hugged her arms and stood there, blank. After a while of this blankness, she took a cab and went to her house. She had only just returned home. She didn't have any friends. She was on her own. There was no one who would help her. Her father was determined to use her and Liam to get a partnership with the Clare family. How could he call himself a good father? She felt both angry and resentful when she thought about this. But she narrowed her eyes and clenched her fists tightly. No matter what, she had to get Liam back. If something were to happen to him, she would never forgive them. Episode 14. She clearly likes him. Since Bryce wasn't willing to help, Natalie could only rely on herself. She had to find her child. She absolutely couldn't let her father and the others win. She made up her mind and returned to her family home, but did not go in through the main entrance. Instead, she snuck in through the backyard, carefully avoiding all the surveillance cameras. Her father had taken Liam, so the first place she thought he might have taken him was this house. If her father had him hidden in any corner of this place, she would find him, leave with him, and never return. But even though she looked all over, there was no sign of him. He wasn't there. She raised her eyebrows, but before she could think about it anymore, she heard a sweet voice say, "Wow, I'm so tired." It was Cheryl. Natalie was shocked. She immediately hid behind a potted plant, using the dense foliage to hide herself. Through the gaps between the leaves, she saw Cheryl and Nick slowly walking toward her. "If you're tired, why don't we go and lie down?" Nick raised his eyebrows with a suggestive smile. "You're so annoying," Cheryl scolded him playfully. He pulled her into his embrace and lightly touched the tip of her nose. "I know you like it. Why won't you admit it?" "You're so annoying. I'm ignoring you." Cheryl, whose thoughts had been exposed, pretended to be angry and turned her face away. But Nick continued to tease her, even though he knew she was pretending. Looking at the two of them and hearing Nick's sweet words, bitterness surged up in Natalie's heart, and she quietly clenched her hands by her sides. Back then, he had teased her like this. Back then, she had thought that he loved her and that they would spend the rest of their lives together. But this lack of trust in her after the incident had completely destroyed her feelings for him. When she thought about how she had once felt about this piece of trash, she wanted to laugh. She really must have been blind. "Dad told me to take care of that annoying kid." When Natalie heard Cheryl mention her son, she quickly stopped her mind from wandering and listened attentively. "He's at the hotel by himself. If anything happens, it'll be trouble. But I don't really want to go," Cheryl pouted. She wasn't willing to go to the hotel to take care of Natalie's son. Nick frowned. In all honesty, he hated Liam. The boy's existence reminded him of Natalie's betrayal all those years ago. But as Cheryl had said, he was very important to the Davidson family. So he weighed the pros and cons, suppressed his disgust, and said to Cheryl with a smile, "I'll go with you." "Really?" She was pleasantly surprised. He nodded. "Let's go." "All right." Liam's at the hotel. Natalie watched Cheryl and Nick's retreating backs. She followed them quietly. In fact, she followed them all the way to the hotel without them realizing it. But when she reached the front door, she was stopped by the concierge. "Miss, please show me your membership card." "Membership card?" Natalie frowned. Seeing her doubt, the concierge explained, "Our hotel requires a membership card to enter." Natalie didn't have a membership card. She could only watch as Cheryl and Nick disappeared from her sight. She sighed in frustration, stepped back, and looked up at the hotel. She didn't know which floor Liam was being kept on. Meanwhile, in the restaurant on the second floor of the hotel, Bryce was eating with his parents. Robert and Michelle Clare had been living abroad for a long time. It was rare for them to come back to America, so Bryce had canceled his previous engagements and come to the hotel to meet them for dinner. As a parent, when she saw that her son still didn't have a girlfriend, despite being 32 years old, a suitable age for marriage, his mother felt anxious. "Bryce, when are you going to get married?" She put down the spoon she had been holding while eating and glared with dissatisfaction at Bryce, who was sitting opposite her. "When it's time, of course," he replied plainly. Hearing this, Michelle couldn't help but get angry. "You always talk back to your father and me. I think you wouldn't get married even if we died." "Mom." Bryce lifted his hand and rubbed his forehead. He looked at her helplessly. "I will get married, but I can't just rush into it." Hearing that, she let out a heavy sigh and her tone became more gentle. "I know you've been very busy these past few years, so busy that you didn't have time to think about your personal life. But now that the company is growing so steadily, it's time for you to make a plan. Your dad and I are still waiting to hold our grandson." Michelle said this while nudging Robert, who was still sitting beside her. He was surprised, but he reacted quickly. "Your mother is right. Now that the Clare family is in a stable position, you should relax. Find a girlfriend, get married." Did they think he could find a girlfriend just anywhere? That he could get married just like that? Bryce didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head. Then out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of a woman standing outside the hotel entrance downstairs. His gaze suddenly turned cold. Why was she here? Michelle noticed that something was wrong with him and frowned. "Bryce, are you all right?" He looked away and shook his head. "It's nothing." He lowered his head to eat, but his eyes, which held a frosty expression, never left the woman. He hadn't expected her to follow him here. If he had known she would do this, he would never have helped her. Apparently, he couldn't shake her off so easily. A wave of disgust rose in his heart. He withdrew his gaze and continued to eat, pretending that he hadn't seen her. Downstairs, Natalie didn't know that she had been spotted by Bryce. She continued to look up at the hotel, her teeth nibbling at her lower lip, her pretty little face clearly annoyed. She knew that Liam was inside, but she couldn't reach him. She was livid. It didn't matter, though. As long as he was here, she had time to find a way to get him out. The most important thing right now was figuring out how to get inside. Just when she felt a loss for what to do, she saw an advertisement in the window next to her. The hotel was hiring waiters and waitresses. Natalie's eyes lit up. She had hope. She tore down the advertisement, returned to the concierge, and showed it to him. "I'm not a member. I'm here to apply."